Hey guys, what's up? It's Jules here for WhatCulture Gaming, joined as ever by Josh. Hello, my friend.
Hello, I'm hyped.
You're very hyped today, and I think I know why. It's because we got no news. The gaming industry just decided to not have anything exciting or anything super relevant happen today. However, something did come into our minds like a little worm and burrow deep inside, and that is the giant rotting apple that some may call EA. See that worm and apple?
That was a really good analogy, that.
I know. Now, EA as a company have been voted one of the worst companies to work for and public reception for several years in the gaming community. And to be honest, it's not hard to see why. Their business practices seem very money-centric, their work ethic seems to be very crunch-focused, they seem to be the big guy with all the swagger that they can't seem to hear that everyone's making fun of them behind their back.
Well, that's interesting you should say that, because that's the perception that it's been for a long time. They seem like this sort of big corporation who keep getting voted, like you said, the world's worst company. You know, whether that's deserved or not. I mean, maybe there are worse ones out there, but in the gaming industry, they're big. Go on.
I'm just gonna put it out there, a sweatshop. That's the worst company.
Yeah, that's not great, is it?
Yeah, that's literally the worst. Anyway, carry on.
EA is seen as this big monolithic sort of corporation, but is that really deserved? In the blockbuster space, definitely I think the games they've been putting out, the money practices, the shutting down studios, like these horrific tales of crunch and like mismanagement have been bad, but they do some good stuff. And Matt Bailey, AVP of Strategic Growth at EA, went on an event.
That's an evil job title.
What is it? EVP? It sounds like a strategic growth. When you put it like that.
No, because you literally just go like, when you say EVP, what costume do you imagine he wears to work? It's a jet black suit with his oil hair slicked back. He has to tuck the oil into his sleeves, do up his oily tie, and then sit there and be like, looks like you've got no job, bud.
Well, I'll have you know, Matt Bailey sounds like a nice guy.
Sure,
okay,
prove me wrong.
He's talking about EA's sort of like public reception, and he says he's been there for 25 years, and at this EA Play event at E3 last month, he said, 25 years at EA, and I still struggle with the external perception that we're just a bunch of bad guys, which, like we've just been saying, is certainly the public perception, but like he went on to talk about his role in the EA Originals program, and they do fund really great artistic projects that otherwise wouldn't get made. We've had like games like Unravel, which is perhaps the biggest one, and they have some good practices. Like every single bit of profit that gets made from those games goes straight back into the developers.
That's fantastic.
And they only cover the costs, which is great, but when he's talking about like this should be the face of EA, not the Anthems of the world, I don't know if that's fair, because this is just such a small part of EA that doesn't get anywhere near as much focus as this big AAA titles and doesn't bring in the same amount of money. So it's not necessarily, even reflective of half of the company, never mind the entirety of the company's approach to video games as a whole.
If FIFA, for example, was just part of the untold, original program, then fine, you'd have people sort of like going that, but they just don't pull in the same figures that these massive franchises that they have, and of course they have to keep their bottom line of interest, and it's going to be doubling down on these shooters, these sports games, because they know that it nets them a severe amount of money.
Yes.
The problem isn't with the game quality. The problem is their approach to things like microtransactions and public interaction. They are a figureheadless company, and as such, they are faceless, and it's very easy to hate them.
That's entirely spot on. That was so eloquently put, Jules. I like that argument a lot. It was really nice.
I've had my blue. I've had my fabric softener this morning, so I'm feeling pretty on point.
No, I totally agree. Like the quality of the games they make, are like, mostly they make decent games.
Yes,
they might.
Let's break them down. Let's break down the recent ones. Like, if we are to remove just from your mind, scrap the loot boxes and microtransactions from it, and let's just look at the gameplay. FIFA is an exceptional game. Yeah. They wouldn't have such commercial success if they didn't nail the actual gameplay experience. The NFL games that they do, like they do amazing as well. They do the UFC stuff that is still being played to this day by hundreds of thousands, millions of people. I update it all the time. And then you've got like even down to like the Star Wars Battlefronts. I know that a lot of people say that they mishandled the license, but you talk to people like you and who still play it. You talk to people like me who still go on it occasionally. It is a fundamentally decent game at its core.
Well, I guess that's what's so frustrating about EA as a whole, because they have these really great studios who are really passionate and make great games, but they just seem to be mangled at every single turn by the forced business practices. Like you said, take the microtransactions and loot boxes out of a game like Battlefront 2, and suddenly it's really very good and really very tight and really beautiful, and oh my god, I'm actually in Star Wars. I think it's kind of what we're seeing with Respawn. Their game, Jedi Fallen Order, is coming out at the end of this year. They're not officially, well, they're officially part of EA now, but when they started that game, they were sort of like a second party studio. They were funded by EA, but they weren't owned by EA. And I think that shines through when you don't have that direct sort of pressure or control coming in from the top level. They were able to make a game that was one single player, two free of microtransactions, and didn't need a multiplayer mode to survive. All things that EA as a corporate company have been moving away from in the past few years.
You've got to also ask yourself as well, for as much as they are supporting these indie developers that they choose, remember, are they not also guilty of taking developers that had successful franchises on their own and burying them with an absolute mire of just dreck, basically? You've got, like, Criterion is a perfect example. When they were out there busting their ass making games for the Burnout series, they were class games, and EA supported them. Then it's just said, nah, you're not making them anymore. The closest you're gonna get is making some stuff for other games in which we might need a driving section. And you know what? People still always say that those sections reflect the best qualities of that that publisher, and therefore they're the best bits about that game. So what they're doing is they are embracing new developers with one hand, but they're kind of very much like the WWE. They're bringing people up, they're nurturing them within there, saying like, you could be part of the EA big squad, like, do these originals, get really famous, and then we'll talk some more. Then they grab them and they pull them into the amorphous blob that is the rest of the company, that is faceless and potentially directionless, and then you just end up working on smaller parts of bigger games, and you're just stuck in the machines of the cog.
That's exactly it, because it happens in two ways, I feel. When you bring in a sort of team like Visceral Games, who made Dead Space, and then they kind of force them to add in co-op and add in like these weird microtransactions workbench, which is still one of the worst things of all time. And then Dead Space 3 doesn't sell well, so then EA goes, oh well, so we don't want these single-player horror games.
People don't like this
People
anymore.
don't like this anymore. We'll put you on something that people do like, Battlefield Hardline, but these developers weren't successful for creating first-person multiplayer shooters, so then Battlefield Hardline comes out, and it's a pretty decent game, it's a great effort, but you can tell that this is not what the studio is versed in, so then that doesn't sell very well.
And then they come back to them and say, sorry lads, you had your chance, and it's like you blew it.
Yes, exactly that. Then, oh my god, you blew it. It's kind of what was said in the report earlier this year on Anthem, when BioWare were working on sort of Mass Effect and then later Anthem, obviously, when they were doing Andromeda. They were saying about how some of the developers on record anonymously were saying about how they didn't receive the support from EA because EA was essentially like, why aren't you making $800 million a year like FIFA? Like, where's your Ultimate Team? And then they weren't getting the support on the Frostbite engine, which meant the games were delayed and meant their ambition had to be scaled down, which made ultimately for worse games. And once that was done, they essentially were just like, okay, now give us something we do like. And then they had to make Anthem.
We do actually need to talk about the Frostbite engine. I feel like that is something that it's a fantastic engine that can create some amazing things if you know how to work with it. Like, EA was apparently quite specific with BioWare, making them shift focus with the Frostbite engine that came in when they were making Anthem. They've done it before where they've just said like, look, this is the hardware that we're using, you better get on board and don't use anything else. That is limiting. They're basically saying that our creative color set is only going to be these like 30 colors, when yes, they are fantastic pigmentation, and I'm sure they're made of the finest crushed bugs that you can get. But at the same time, there's a nice color out there. Maybe I want a teal. Who doesn't like teal?
Who doesn't like teal?
You know what I'm saying? Oh, that's why. I was wondering why I was like so obsessed with the colour. I was like, what are you doing with my drink? But it's things like that I feel like they want to be seen as a closed unit. Because I feel like they are potentially worried about how they are perceived. This is why these statements are coming out. They're scared that their public image is affecting their games, so they're just trying to basically be like, block ourselves off. We're not going to take any criticism. We're just going to grab all of the best developers, like all the marbles in the pockets, and stuff them in there. We're taking them home.
Well, that's even what Matt Bailey said. He had another quote later on, which I thought was really enlightening. He said, in response to EA partners and originals, he said, that's why as we look at EA partners and originals, and even the games we make, we're not just delivering games in one specific genre. We need big games, small games, multiplayer games, co-op games, single-player games. And while that might be true further down the company in these additive sort of like smaller studios like EA Originals. I don't think that's really reflected across the board at the top level big AAA games. We have a lot of shooters, we have a lot of live service games, we don't have any single player games, and then we've got sports games. And I think every single year at E3 when they announce their booth, it's a constant joke. It's like we already know, even though we might not know the specific games, we know exactly what you're going to announce. You're going to have your big sports games things, you're going to have your FIFAs, your Maddens, you're going to have Anthem, you're going to have stuff like that. And it's kind of like, we need a diversity in the library that's just missing. And it's such a shame because last time they tried to reboot their image was around 2008. And that's when they introduced new IP like Dead Space, like Mirror's Edge, and then they kind of drove those franchises into the ground. But there was a concerted effort to change, and I don't think we've seen that as of yet.
I feel like if they were to go back and take a risk on these new IPs, then we would actually see more success stories. The problem is, I don't want to sound too harsh because I know that there are, in the EA Originals, there are some fantastic games out there, but they're not the next big thing. Whereas Mirror's Edge, Dead Space, they had the potential to be, and they sold extremely well. They were, at their times, the big things. People were talking about them all across the board. But they cost a lot more investment than I know that those indie games, or effectively, that are coming out through their company. What they need to do is just go, look, let's just take a punt. Let's just get this thing in and do it this way. They tried it with Anthem, but then they got cold feet, and the mismanagement that was going on there, that was a disaster story that became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I hope that they haven't been put off by that.
Yeah, I mean, and you're exactly right. Like, I think it's just sort of their own expectations as often as damaging as anything else. Like Mirror's Edge, Dead Space sold pretty well, but like Mirror's Edge, they sort of looked at that as like a kind of financial disappointment, even though it's sort of wasn't if you sort of in relation to everything else, but because it didn't sell, again, like a FIFA amount of copies or a Battlefield amount of copies, it gets binned. And it's like, there should be space for having your higher expectations. You should, like, when you have a franchise like Battlefield, you should expect to sell, a lot because it's been selling that in the past. But when you introduce something like Dead Space, which is niche, you should be able to find a way to still make profit off 3, 4, 5 million copies.
Yes. I mean, there's a thing to be said when a game comes out and sells millions and is still considered to be a disappointment. And I feel that's a real shame that we've got ourselves into in this industry right now. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard the story of Kingdoms of Amalur.
I have not.
So that got a $75 million budget, not from EA, they were from a different company. But when it came back to it, they realized that they would need to be the company who made it needed to be hitting out hit after hit, selling millions and millions of units, every single game that they did, just to make that loan back. And it was like completely impossible. And I feel like EA is setting up IPs to fail because they're saying, you need to make us a FIFA amount of money. It's like, you know what, this idea just can't. Every time you look back in the past about consoles, majority of consoles are sold at a loss and they make back their money on the sales of games. EA needs to start looking at their IPs like consoles, maybe take a hit on the first one, maybe it won't be the big one, but the sequel, the trilogy, the next bit that spawns off of that, you're building trees with seeds, you're not just trying to go like, nice carrot there, pal, I'm gonna harvest that straight away, right?
No, I think you're exactly spot on. I think we've even seen that mentality happen with the first game like Anthem, like that had a roadmap, that had some plans, and although EA keeps saying they're going to support it, where is it?
Yeah, where's
the support? You know what I mean? You can keep saying it all you want, but now that's failed. The team has moved on to Dragon Age 4. I think BioWare Austin has come in to sort of continue like the roadmap or whatever. But again,
I feel so sorry for them.
Where is it? I do as well.
I mean, imagine that, just kind of like walking onto a ship and just seeing that the entire like second or third deck is completely submerged and be like,
well, I've got some sticky tip. I'll grab
this, I guess. Shall I? But there we go. That has been our thoughts on the sort of direction of EA, where they're headed, and can they turn it around? Because you know what? There is potential for EA to do good.
I hope so.
But the problem is, they need to do good. So there we go. It's all down to them at the end of the day. Let us know what you thought about it down in the comments section below, as well as any other comments you have on this subject, as I'll be very keen to hear what people have to say about this. So as I've been Jules, you can go follow me at RetroJ with a 0 over on Twitter, and
I've been Josh. You can follow me at Josh Broom with 2 O's over on Twitter.
Thank you so much for joining us, and if you are interested, then we are going to be having a premiere of Chatty Faces tomorrow. I can't tell you what it's going to be on because that's a bit of a secret. You can go and join our Discord and maybe you'll be able to find out what the subject's on, but it will be live at 1 p.m. I hope to see you there. But until then, catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.